Hello there. I'm hoping that you can hear me and see me okay. I'm having a little bit of a Wi-Fi issue because, you may notice that I have a different background today, and that is because I'm not at home. I am down in sunny, well, not so sunny today because it's about to rain, but I'm in Tampa, Florida with my sister friend, Patricia Morrison, and we have just had a fantabulous weekend. So thank you for being here this evening. I want to welcome you to tonight's broadcast because, like they say in show business, the show must go on. Whether I'm in PA or, hey, Nicole, or I'm in Tampa or wherever I might be. So we have a topic that we're going to talk about tonight that I believe is thanks, Nicole. I'm glad she said she could see and hear me fine. That I think is kind of near and dear and concerning to a lot of people nowadays. And that's what we're going to talk about, the subject of autism. What is it exactly? What does it mean to be on the spectrum? What are some of the challenges that parents face when they are trying to navigate through the process once their child has been diagnosed? One of the individuals who could not be live with us tonight because she's celebrating her birthday, I interviewed her a couple of days ago. So at some point during the broadcast, I'm going to play that interview if everything works out okay. Because, sometimes technology does its own thing. But for right now, I want to introduce my amazing guest. I'm going to start with my firstborn child, Miss Sidel Chase Rosario. Welcome, my darling boo-boo. Unmute yourself and say something.
Hello. I apologize in advance for any background noise. I'm actually in the car driving home. A little bit about myself. I graduated from Howard with a degree in psychology for well over 10 years. I did child abuse investigations and was supervising child abuse investigations. I have also been supervisor of group homes for adults with developmental disabilities, and I am currently a kickboxing and jiu-jitsu instructor for Tiger Showmans in Cherry Hill, sometimes also Malton, New Jersey. And I would say at least 75% of my students are somewhere on the spectrum. So I deal with it every single day. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, my daughter. Next, I'm going to introduce Miss Carmelita Hale from Georgia, and she's going to tell you about herself and her practice, Carmelita's Couch, and what that's all about.
Hi, yes, my name is Carmelita. Obviously, I'm a therapist, but I'm also a life coach, and I started Carmelita's Couch, where I provide life coaching services as an alternative to traditional therapy, predominantly specialize in working with teenagers. However, I have progressed where I'm really seeing a little bit of everybody. And I myself have a child that is on the spectrum.
Okay, thank you, Carmelita. And last but certainly not least, one of my favorite people on the planet. She is my supervisor, and she is none other than Dr. Danita Thompson.
Hi, Valerie. Hi, Carmelita and Sidel. Thank you for having me. I am, as you said, Dr. Danita. I'm the founder and CEO of Mending Hearts Behavioral Health and Family Services. We are a state licensed outpatient clinic, mental health outpatient clinic, serving in South Central New Jersey in the town of Florence. And we currently serve couples, families, children, individuals who are dealing with any mental health challenges. We do marriage counseling, premarital counseling as well, medication management, and psychiatric evaluations. And so I'm excited to be on this episode, sharing whatever I can about this mental health illness.
So thank you, Dr. Anita. Thank you, Sidel. Thank you, Carmelita. And, I have been serving at Mending Hearts Behavioral Health for a couple of years, and I can tell you it's been a wonderful experience. It's a extremely family oriented, welcoming environment, and I encourage anyone who needs any type of counseling, therapy, mental health assessment, whatever your mental health needs might be, to check out Mending Hearts Behavioral Health Center in Florence, New Jersey. And the website is Mending Hearts. It's a Mending Hearts Behavioral Health.
Mending Hearts BH.
MendingHeartsBH.com. Mm-hmm. And those of you who are in Georgia, of course, you want to check out Miss Carmelita's Couch down there in Georgia. So to get started, Dr. Danita, if you could just tell us exactly what is autism, because, we hear the term and sometimes people don't know exactly what it is, what it means when someone is said to be autistic. What exactly is autism?
Yes. So autism is basically a developmental disability, and it's caused by having differences in the brain structure. Mm-hmm. It could be genetic. It has a genetic component, biological, environmental. All of those play an important role in the one having autism.
Mm-hmm. I have heard that there are a lot of individuals who associate their child or other children having been diagnosed with autism with being vaccinated early. And as a result, some parents have stopped vaccinating their children or refused to vaccinate their children and have gone as far as homeschooling them, because if you go to a public school, you got to get vaccinated. So I'm wondering if any of you could have heard that, what are your thoughts on it, and if you could speak to it in any way.
Well, I follow Dr. Amen, and he's a psychiatrist, and he's done a lot of work with children who have autism and ADHD. The research doesn't prove that vaccinations have any connection at the moment. However, Dr. Amen doesn't believe that. He thinks that there is a definite connection, and he goes as far as to say that if he has it his way, he wouldn't permit his grandchildren to be vaccinated. I don't know.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, Carmelita, do you have any thoughts on that?
I kind of feel the same way as Dr. Danita, that research has not proven that vaccinations are the cause of autism, but I know there are lots of people who believe that there is a connection. And particularly my daughter, who is on the spectrum, is 14. So 14 years ago or so, when she was born, people really thought that kind of giving kids vaccinations at the same time, like 5-6 vaccinations, sometimes they were getting, in the same visit, also was a cause. I mean, that's not something I did. I kind of, I spread her vaccinations out. She didn't get, all those vaccinations at one time. Yeah. But, I have to go with the research at this time and say that, it could be there could be a correlation, but, the proof is not there.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder, I'm always big in wondering, what's going on in the environment, what's going on in the food, because when you look at the statistics back in the 80s, I did a little research. So back in the 80s, it was 1 in 10,000 children who were diagnosed. By the 2000s, it was 1 in 150. And now
Wow.
it's 1 in 59. And they're saying by 2050, it's going to be half the children who are diagnosed. Now, we could say that back in the 80s, maybe they weren't, as aware, and maybe more people did have it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't know. The 80s wasn't that long ago. It wasn't like not for my age. I don't feel like the 80s was that.
And even like when my daughter was born, it was 1 in 88. And then, I was reading some research over the weekend that said we're now at 1 in 36. So even in that short period of time, the numbers have definitely gone up significantly.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think about people believing that vaccinations are the cause of autism, but I would assume that all of us on the panel are vaccinated, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as if vaccinations are something new. I personally would think at this point there would be some type of research to support that, because vaccinations have been around for quite some time, and
Right.
the research still doesn't support that. So I'm not discounting it. It's possible, but
Yeah,
I personally believe that vaccinations, kids have been getting vaccinated long enough that there should be some or enough research to support that. And like you guys are saying, not looking at what's in the food, what's in the water, all of those things play a role in it.
Yeah.
And I think that now people are more aware of what autism is, just the same way with ADHD. There's all of these new diagnoses because now we know what it actually is.
Right.
Yeah. I think there could possibly be some kind of connection or correlation with vaccination, but I don't think it is the cause.
Right.
Because Dr. Heaney make a great point, because we have to consider the environmental component, which I think is huge, because I think we are all being impacted by the way in which we as humans treat this earth. We only got one, and we are slowly destroying it with pollutants and whatnot, and we are all impacted by it. See, I think vaccines are an easy target, okay? And we can say that environment affects us physiologically, but sometimes we may be reluctant to say that environment impacts us psychologically and mentally and emotionally as well. So I think it's I'm trying to think of the right word. I don't think it would be accurate to totally eliminate that environmental component. So Dr. Danita, when a child is diagnosed as being autistic or somewhere on the spectrum, how are they diagnosed? How does that happen?
Well, we use, I say I typically at my level of my professional level, we don't typically diagnose, but we are able to at least make some sort of recommendation. And we use the DSM, and that is the diagnostic statistical manual that the psychiatrists and psychologists use. And so when we use that manual for any diagnosis, there's certain criteria that the person has to meet. And so there are sections, and in those sections, they usually have to fall like in the category of 2 or 3 of them, and in order for it to, be a diagnosis. And so with autism, the specific areas are like with the social interaction, with their behaviors that are persistent, and the language. And so there are like 3 categories that the child would have to meet and check off some of those areas. Like, do they have a lack of social emotional, reciprocity with other children? do they have normal conversation, back and forth, able to have that conversation, or, is there a lack of ability to share or to engage, with others? Do they, for young children, one of the telltale is like when you try to play peekaboo with your child and they have like blanks there, they're not engaging with the mom or the dad. And so not being able to have the eye contact, and some of those like repetitive pattern behaviors, like flipping toys and doing the same motion over and over and over and over again, the same repetition, also falls in the category. Echoing, like repeating someone. So those are just some of the examples: rigid thinking, fixations.
Yeah. Okay. So when we hear on the spectrum, what exactly does that mean? Carmelita, can you speak to that?
I'm sorry. For me, when I hear on the spectrum, it's a wide range. That's the thing about autism. There is no cookie cutter definition. Every single child or adult with autism, in my experience, is different. In the professional environment and the personal environment, it's a very wide range. There are some people who are functioning very high on the spectrum, Asperger's, and you might not even know that they have autism. They learn to pay attention to those social cues and things like that. And then there's some individuals who have, as Dr. Danita said, those repetitive behaviors and things like that, where it's more prevalent. I always say with my daughter, especially in her younger years, I used to say it was a gift and a curse that she doesn't look like she has autism, because people would expect her to behave in sort of age appropriate ways that that a typical child would be behaving, and she wasn't able to do that. So
I that makes sense. When you just said that it is a blessing and a curse that she doesn't, quote unquote, look like someone who has autism or who is on the spectrum, as opposed to someone who has Down syndrome, because they have a particular look, and there is a different expectation of that individual than there would be of someone who was on the spectrum, who may have some of the same delays, but since they don't, quote unquote, look like they do or look like they might, they may be approached differently, and maybe perhaps even in a learning or social setting be treated a certain way, because, well, why don't you get it? Why don't you understand? Because go ahead.
I'm glad you said that, because in thinking about this topic for the day, that was my exact example. Like, Down syndrome has specific physical characteristics that, whether or not you know a whole lot about it, you can say, okay, this person more likely than not has Down syndrome. Autism is such a wide spectrum, and realistically, there's not really a physical defining characteristic of an autistic person. Now, there may be some, things that they do, like the hand flapping, repetitive motion, walking on their toes. But again, it's not something you can just look at them and say that person has autism. Like, it's kind of stuff you have to know what you're looking for. You have to know what you're looking for.
Exactly. And I just want to, anyone who's watching, I welcome your questions, your comments. Anything you just want to share in the chat is greatly appreciated. So a lot of people have heard about Asperger's, because sometimes they're, hey, baby cakes. That's my husband, my cookie man. SS stands for sunshine. That's his nickname for me. See, he done got me all flustered. I can't even get my thoughts together.
Let her even get back home.
I know, right? So Asperger's, I think a lot of people have heard about. There have even been characters on TV who have had Asperger's syndrome. So I'm wondering, when you talk about being on the spectrum, are there other specific diagnoses or disorders, spectrum specific disorders, other than Asperger's? And what might they be?
There's autism spectrum disorder, Asperger's syndrome, childhood disintegrative disorder, and pervasive developmental disorder, which is what my daughter is diagnosed with.
Oh, okay. And how, I want to talk to you specifically about with you and your daughter, but before you do, what differentiates that specific disorder on the spectrum from, let's say, Asperger's or something else, the one that you say your daughter is diagnosed with?
Pervasive developmental disorder is developmental and delays in developmental and social skills. So it's not, you don't necessarily meet the mark of, as Dr. Danita said earlier, of all the characteristics needed to be in the other areas, but that child is exhibiting some significant developmental, in the early years might be not crawling, or walking, meeting their milestones, or she stated with peekaboo, not social or verbal.
Yeah. So how old was your daughter when she was diagnosed?
She was about 2.5.
Okay. And was that something you suspected and requested she be tested for, or was that something her pediatrician picked up on?
It was something I suspected. The pediatrician did not pick up on it. I've had a feeling, that something wasn't right. But I remember the specific moment when I knew there was an issue. I had went to a birthday party, and there was another little girl at this party who was the same age, as a matter of fact, some months younger than my daughter, who was about 2. And she was just doing all these things that my daughter wasn't doing. And it didn't really stand out to me because at that time I was a stay-at-home mom. And so she was really like the only 2-year-old I was around, to be honest with you. Right. So when she was, sort of delayed, but it wasn't anything alarming, I didn't think as much, but I did feel like, like she wasn't talking. She almost she said mama and dada and then stopped, then just didn't say anything. But I was like, people are, every kid in their own time, that kind of thing. But when I saw the other little girl who was months younger, and she was walking around having full-on conversations, socializing, doing all this stuff, picking things up, asking for something to eat, I was like, it just blew my mind. And I called early intervention that Monday morning. It was a Saturday. And that Monday morning, I myself called the local early intervention and asked, for them to come out and do an assessment. And they did. Wow. And that kind of got the journey started.
That was really good that you started that early. So many parents struggle for so long to accept it that they miss that very early window to be able to start the early intervention. So that was really good that you.
Yeah, and that was even late, to be honest with you, as far as early intervention, which technically stops at 3 years old. She was already, 2, a little over 2, and then it took some time to get an appointment and then the assessment. And by the time the services really started, she was aging out of early intervention.
Oh, wow.
But I was already connected, so, we were able to keep the ball rolling with service.
Yeah. So what did that early intervention look like?
Occupational therapy, speech therapy. She had physical therapy, getting her into preschool because, as I stated, I was a stay-at-home mom, so she was home. Once I realized she had delays, I found actually a school in my area, which was inclusive preschool, traditional, neurotypical children as well as children with various medical or developmental diagnoses. And I got her enrolled in that preschool.
Okay.
And so initially, I'm always trying to inspire whoever I can who might be, dealing with this issue and not really knowing, sort of what to do or don't have hope. And so my daughter was nonverbal until she was 7. I mean, like mute, said nothing. And so I did the early intervention and I never knew, like, maybe she'll talk, maybe she won't talk. Like, I don't really know. But I kept consistent and people would ask, is she going to talk? Like, I don't know. And I always think of going to her. She saw a neurologist every 6 months. And so every time we went from 3 to 7, he would talk to her. Oh, yeah, how are you? How's your day? And she never would say anything. And one day we went, she was about 7 years old. And he said, hi, Anaya, how are you? And she said, hi, Dr. Morris. He about passed out.
Wow.
I mean, and he was like, how are you doing? And she was like, fine. And he was like, what grade are you in? And she was like, I'm in first grade. And she had an entire
It sounds like she had
blown away.
Not to talk.
I'm sorry?
It almost sounds like she had selective mutism where she could talk. She just decided not to. All of a sudden, hey, she was speaking.
Yeah.
Whoever.
Yeah.
Talking about this whole time, I think that Asperger's and PDD are easier to diagnose at a younger age because of the characteristics of them. Like we all know, well, I can't say we all, but most people associate Asperger's with like, Rain Man. You have those kind of, they used to call it way back in the day, idiot savant. So you have those kind of behaviors with Asperger's. Somebody with PDD, their developmental delays are in several areas. See that very people like the big chunk in the middle of the spectrum. It's a lot harder to diagnose and longer in life to diagnose because they may only have one or two things. They may only have issues with eye contact and so it could look like a kid that doesn't want to look at you, doesn't want to listen, but they're on the spectrum. So there's certain parts of the spectrum, high and low, that are like easier to diagnose early on. Then you have this big chunk in the middle. It could be, could not be.
And a lot of the acting out behaviors that you see are the frustration level of not being able to communicate effectively.
Yeah. So my cookie man, he said early intervention is a great tool, but so many parents don't want to admit there's an issue or they're embarrassed that it's their baby.
Yes.
It's their child. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Carmelita, what was that like for you when your daughter was diagnosed as being on the spectrum? What did that feel like for you?
The hardest thing about it was just not knowing, sort of like, what do I do now? And so, I just did as much research as possible to know, how to, best support her, making sure that I, had everything in place that I could. And that's really an ongoing process because as she ages up developmentally, those needs are different. I wasn't that parent that felt it was a curse or it was the worst thing in the world or anything like that. My daughter was born prematurely. And so for me, from the day of birth, I have had to be grateful and thankful that she is alive. And so anything other than that, I can take, So some of those babies in that NICU did not make it out of there. My child did, being born at 28 weeks. So I've always just been thankful for that. And I know that it could be so much worse. So it's not the end of the world for me.
Yeah, that's good. Well, my niece Toya couldn't be with us, but I did interview her and I'm going to try to share it now. Bear with me for a minute because I know I have to do something down here. What do I got to do down here? Hang on for a second. I'm trying to figure it out. Wait a minute. Oh, man. There's supposed to be a button down here that tells me to... Okay, hold on. Maybe it's this one. Oh, share screen now. Okay. I have to hit something before I get to share screen. And now I hit the share screen again. Let me see if I can get to the video. Oh man. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. What do y'all see? Y'all see? Y'all just
Nothing yet.
Just us.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how to get to. Oh man, just bear with me. I am so sorry. I have it opened down below. Boo boo.
Carmelita, let me ask you while Valerie is.
Thank you so much for saving me. Go ahead.
Yes.
You say so your daughter started talking at 7 and she never stopped.
Yes, she just progressively increased her vocabulary.
That's great.
Yes.
So what is her functioning compared to her peers today?
She still struggles socially, I would say, but everywhere else is on par with her. She's a rising ninth grader. I mean, with her ninth grade peers. She's in regular education. She's making A's and B's.
Oh,
She doesn't have any type of behavioral issues or problems at school. But, she does still struggle socially. That's the biggest, sort of, area of improvement at this time.
Yeah. She recognizes it.
I'm not sure if it, I don't want to say bothers her. I mean, that's been her life, but I do feel sometimes, I worry as a mom sometimes that she's lonely.
Right.
And the biggest thing I would say is don't hold your child back. Don't limit them. I know for me, with her, people tend to limit their children and other people will limit your child. Don't allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And so people assume that because she couldn't talk, she was deaf. That was an ongoing thing. And I was constantly telling people she could hear perfectly fine. And then people assume because she couldn't talk, she couldn't read. And, those type of things, I had to contend with, especially at school. I had to always be her biggest supporter, and if it wasn't for some of that fighting I did on the front end, she would not be where she is today, which is on grade level, making A's and B's. I haven't had a chance to post yet that she won her award or the award ceremony, the honor ceremony this year. I mean, I almost cried at that. So, I would say my theory has been, as a parent with her, I never say she can't do something until she can't do it. So we're going to try something and then we'll try it. And if it doesn't work or it goes left, well, all right, maybe we need to make some adjustments and then we can still do it. Or, when she was younger, like going places, because as people on the spectrum tend to be runners and they have a fascination with water. So those are safety issues that you definitely have to consider when you're out with children. And so in those early years, I never went anywhere without at least one other adult or like a teenage helper, like one of my friends' teens or something like that. I went to like an amusement park or something like that. That was kind of my personal rule. I always had to have one other set of hands with me because I had other children to be able to, keep an eye on her, but I still went. I still took her, when she didn't talk to people, I still took her out every single day and got her out in the world. Cause I feel like, again, based on my experience, I'm not an expert in this area, that a lot of kids on the spectrum are like in this, personal box that they stay in. And it's our job to get them out. Get them out to the light. to come out. And so my thing with her was accessories. I would dress up in accessories when she was little. And so when we would go out during the day, people just loved us. So they would say, oh my gosh, come here, honey, look at this little girl. She's so cute. Hi. And she would say nothing, but then she started making eye contact, smiling, waving. Like I saw those things, come out where at first she like nothing. You could do tricks, nothing. But as she kept getting, that interaction, she started interacting back non-verbally, but it was communication. It was I could go on. But I would say don't limit your children, because the things that she has done that people said she would never do, doctors, teachers, 1 year in first grade, her teacher told me that she could not read. And then she compared her kind of to like a savant. Well, maybe she can read. She said she couldn't comprehend what she was reading. And I was like, how do you know that? But she was convinced, well, even if she can read, it's just reading words on a page like a savant. She doesn't understand anything she's reading. And I was convinced that she could understand what she was reading. And so they automatically left her out of like the reading program for the regular first graders, where you do the comprehension test and take a test, and they just automatically excluded her. And I was like, no, I'd like her to do it. And they're like, oh, she can't. And so anyway, I fought for it to happen. And she ended up in the newspaper that year getting the highest score in the school district.
Wow.
Her and a couple of other students. She ended up in the picture of her, still nonverbal, highest reading score. But I always think of that experience, that teacher. I hope she's tuned in. And she said, I'll tell you what. This is exactly how she said it to me. I'll tell you what. We'll put her in the program, and we'll let her take the test at the end of the book, and we'll send you home the results. And so you can see how she does. I said, okay, wonderful. Thank you. Please do that. And so the first day she came home and it was a 50. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, she knows at least half. I was okay with it. And the second day, it was a 70. And the third day, it was an 80. And the fourth day, it was 100. And then it was just 100, 100, 100. They just, after about 3-4 weeks, they just stopped even sending them home. 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100. So that's, what I mean when I say don't let ugly people let them tell me they wanted to keep her at preschool level reading books, and I was like, I know. They got offended because I called them baby books. I said, those are baby books. And I was like, I'm not trying to be offensive. What I'm saying is, I was reading those books to her when she was a baby. I know that she's beyond that level of reading, but it was a fight in those beginning years.
Yeah, I think the bigger problem is that it's not enough education to those who are, especially when they're put in regular, with the regular population. Nobody prepares the staff. Nobody prepares the teachers for, anybody but the middle of the road kids. I don't even think the ones who are excelling are really getting what they need from a regular head teacher.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's that twice exceptional kid where you have a disability and you're gifted.
Right.
Right. I think I got the video to work. I'm gonna try to hit it. Okay, I just hit it. I see something swirling on the bottom. Oh, here it is.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, as I indicated, I have a special guest that I interviewed for our broadcast, because unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, fortunately, it's her birthday this weekend. So Sister Girl, we're going to be celebrating.
Yes.
I have my beautiful, amazing niece, Toya Davis, here, everybody. I'm speaking as if I'm live, but I'm about to say, everybody give Toya a shout out. But this is, we're recording it on Zoom because Toya will be celebrating her birthday. And I wanted to interview Toya. I actually wanted her to be on the episode because she is the mother of a son who is autistic, and I got to tell you, if she had not told me that her son was autistic, I never would have known. Okay, never, ever, ever would have known, and that just goes to show that we so many of us have a preconceived notion of what, or I should say, how someone with autism may present. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this topic, because I'm guilty of it. If I thought that someone with autism would present a certain way, and when I met Toya's son, I had no clue. So I just wanted to have a conversation about it to maybe dispel some of those myths, get a greater understanding. So, Toya, at what age was your son first diagnosed or discovered to be autistic?
He was diagnosed at the age, it was before he was 2. So it was about like maybe 20 months. He was diagnosed.
Wow, okay.
So, but there is a difference, which I didn't realize at the time, of being autistic and being on the spectrum. So he is on the autism spectrum, but he's not autistic. At the time, I thought that he was, based on a lot of the things that he was doing. And I think he could have turned out to be autistic if I didn't take drastic measures to make sure that he was not.
Okay. And because 20 months is relatively young.
Yes.
So what led whomever came up with the diagnosis, what was it that led them to that conclusion?
Well, he started things very early. He was walking at 8 months. He was saying mama, dada, things like that. And I noticed he started to regress. So he wouldn't call our names. He would do things which at the time I didn't know, but it's called stemming. It's just a way that children with autism or on the spectrum, they take out like nervous behavior, or so he would hold things in a certain way. At one point, it wasn't very bad, but he would like hit his head sometimes on like the wall, not very hard, but just like, just repetitive actions that normal play for a child. It's not normal play for a child.
Yeah.
So when I began noticing these things, his paternal grandmother, suggested that I get him tested. And, me, I'm like, I'm going to get him tested. There was never a time of denial or my son is okay, or he's going to be okay, or he's not. Because her granddaughter had ADHD, which is, another diagnosis that children have. So yeah. I actually did to, go get him tested, and it was found that he was on the spectrum.
Okay. And how much did you know? What was your understanding regarding autism at that time of your child's diagnosis?
I knew what autism was for a child to be autistic. And usually that meant the child not speaking, the child having a problem communicating, things like that. I didn't honestly know that there was an entire spectrum of, being on an autism spectrum. I had no idea. And at the time, they had very good programs in place. My son is now 19, so at the time, they had a lot of good programs in place it's called early intervention. Basically, it's programs and things like that to help children that have learning disabilities. So he was pretty much enrolled immediately into these programs. So he was literally going to school on a bus, probably at, before 2. years old.
Wow. Okay. So you weren't kidding. So when you said that, you were on it.
Oh yeah. Like I said, I noticed some regression, and it was a huge, when you see your child who's thriving, who's, starting to sound out words, and then they're just not saying anything. You notice their play habits are different. They're not reaching certain milestones. So I quickly noticed it. Even though he's my first, I just knew, like, I've been around so many children growing up that I just knew that this was not right.
Okay. What was that like for you emotionally when your child was first diagnosed?
It was devastating, honestly, because you have so many high expectations for your child, and you don't want someone to look at them like, as a stereotype. Growing up, you tease kids who were in remedial classes, you call them all sorts of names and things like that. And I didn't want that for him. I didn't want him to have that type of life. So it was very difficult for me. But I have a strong, belief in God. Like, I just knew, like, God just showed me the way, show me what I need to do, and I'm gonna get it done. So
yeah, that's good. Wow.
Yeah.
That's really good. So you indicated that you didn't want your son to be treated any differently. Did you ever experience any of that, where he was maybe teased or attempted to be bullied or anything of that sort by his peers?
On a couple of occasions. Like I said, he went to early intervention. So in those schools, no, because he's around kids his age and that are like him or somewhere on the spectrum. So there was no teasing then. But early on, his dad couldn't handle it. So his dad was a coach, youth football coach, youth basketball coach. He did not want to bring his son around. He was embarrassed by him. So that was difficult. I think it would have helped him more had he been around his father, been around other kids to see that. But he was never given that chance. I tried bringing him myself, but it was too much restraint. So that was my first hand of someone being close to us, just kind of, I don't want to say rejecting, but it was just, he couldn't handle it. Many of his friends at the time had kids, and they were thriving and talking and doing all the things he wanted his son to do, but he just couldn't accept the fact that, okay, well, yes, he's this way, but he's going to be okay. So let's just do what we need to do to get him there.
Yeah.
What was great, they just started a program starting for first grade, called the NEST program. And the NEST program was for high functioning children on the spectrum, meaning they're extremely smart. So there's a lot of, like, there's Asperger's, there's other, classifications on the spectrum where the kids are extremely smart, but they just act differently. Yeah. So DJ had to be tested, his IQ had to be tested, and he was part of the first class ever of the NEST program. So the NEST program actually started when he was about 5 years old. So he was a part of the first class. The school he went to was a great school. There were about 6 children in that.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. Let me see how I can. Okay, hold on. Okay, there. I think that did it. Okay, so yeah. So Toya had an experience. Her son was diagnosed close to the same age as your daughter, Carmelita.
Yes.
There was a similar experience, and like you, she also advocated for her child. But it sounds as if her road what was not as challenging as yours, because it sounds like you really, really had to fight, and you had people who were observing your daughter who didn't believe in her and her ability to excel or advance.
Yeah, some, not all. Definitely. Also had a great team of teachers and providers who did believe in her, who were a huge source of her successes. But you always have that one bad apple in the bunch. So
unfortunately,
and those are the ones that I had to push back on. And it's unfortunate. That's where I feel for parents who are not educated on what their rights are, how to support their children. I really encourage that. Like, educate yourself, books, get online, talk to other parents, be a part of a support network, even if you create it for yourself. Because you come into these meetings, like the IEP meetings, and, it's you and a team of, doctorate level, teachers and administrators. It can be very intimidating. And I've even had friends who have children on the spectrum who I've supported, in those environments, as a friend coming to a meeting with them, who literally broke down in tears because of their own, sort of feelings and emotions about what's going on, and then feeling, intimidated or bullied or not heard or what have you, in those type of environments. And so, it can be challenging.
Yeah. You said you use those initials IEP. For people who may not know what that is, can you explain what that is, please?
Individualized education program that follows any child with any type of learning disability, behavioral emotional issues that may require additional support in school, or any type of medical or developmental disability.
Okay.
And the IEP is your best friend, becoming versed on that, and the educational environment is key. One of the things, I was just in a meeting, with my therapist colleagues, and we were talking about a child who was having some issues in school, and I was encouraging them to tell the parent the power is in the pen. If you come to that table and you don't agree with the plan set in place for your child, you do not have to sign, and that's really where the power is, because those other people, part of that individualized education plan, have to work with you, the parent, to come up with a plan that everybody can agree on in order to move forward. When when I went to my first IEP meeting, my daughter was 3 years old, because it starts at preschool age. When they age out of early intervention at 3, then they enter the school district and they get into like the preschool services until kindergarten. And so first IEP meeting, mind you, I had never had one before. If there wasn't even a meeting, they just handed me a packet of paper and a signature page and said, "Can you please sign this?"
Wow.
And that was how they had been accustomed to conducting their IEP meetings.
Until they met Sister Carmelita.
Right? It's like, no, ma'am, we need a meeting. We need a meeting. And the meeting was scheduled, and I still remember, like I said, my daughter was 3, and the director of that program told me that after the meeting, I had her staff on suicide watch. Not my intention. I thought that was extreme. However, and I didn't want to be the problem child, here, because you want to be a part of the solution. So when I found the program in, a neighboring community, that I was able to put her in a preschool program, I still utilize the services provided by my district 2 days a week. And I paid for that other program 3 days a week, which was what I could afford at that time. And I was kind of bringing their wonderful program back to my home district. Like, look what they're doing over here. Look what's happening and what's working. How can I volunteer my services to come in? And, they weren't taking these kids on trips because they were scared to change their schedule and take them out of routine. And I was like, that's a part of life.
Right.
Yes, routine is wonderful for kids on the spectrum, but also sometimes we have to veer from that routine, and they have to become accustomed to that as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, bravo to you, Carmelita.
Yeah.
Wow. I want to ask. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Nita.
I just wanted to something that Toya said that caught my attention. She said that her son's dad wasn't able to handle it. And, as a marriage and family therapist, that's one of the areas that, I see that people don't understand the whole system, the systemic approach to, working with one member of the family that may, not, may have some sort of challenge. And I thought they must not have gotten the support that they needed as as I don't know if they were married, but as parents of the child, the support needs to be for the entire family and not just for the child, because the family it needs to know how to work with the child, how to support the child. How do we do this as a family? How is this going to change our family, and how do we move differently as a family? And so that was unfortunate that he landed where he landed as it relates to his son.
But and also later on in the interview, she did say that eventually he did come around as the son got older, and he could see that the son was able to do more normal things than the father did. Kind of come around and was more accepting of the fact that his son was on the spectrum. Yeah, Carmelita, you wanted to say something?
I was going to say, with Dr. Danita bringing that up, it also reminded me that it's very isolating to be parents of, a special needs child. And, that was something that was very prevalent to me in those beginning years, because, I could not take my daughter to certain events because of, the meltdowns or screaming, or, there was a time when I couldn't even back up, go in reverse in a car. I had to learn how to drive everywhere going, front ways. And so people stopped inviting me to stuff, not because of her behavior, but because I always had to cancel, I had a very close friend who invited me to a graduation, and I didn't have any childcare, and I couldn't go, and the friend was like, just bring her. I was like, do you want your graduation to be ruined? Do you understand what I'm saying? But they were mad at me for years that I didn't attend that event that I wanted to go, that I was dressed to go to, and I just wasn't able to make it. But it felt very isolating. So I got to a point where my friends were, I would say, I still want to be invited. Like, even if I can't come, I still want to be included. I still want to be invited. Someday I'll get there. Don't count me out,
Yeah. And I think that's why education is so incredibly important, not just for the parent and the child, just like you were saying, Dr. Nita, for the entire family, for extended family, for friends, for whomever is a part of the community involved in that child's life. Because when you have that extra support, then it does not have to be an isolating experience. Then there could be a friend or an auntie or an uncle or a grandparent who could say, you know what, Carmelita, who understands the diagnosis, who understands what your child's needs are. Listen, you go to the graduation, go to the dinner, go to Atlantic City, do something for yourself, because I got this. Okay, I'm here for you. And I think that is so important for parents, whether their child has special needs or any parent, to have that support so that they can feel as if they have some semblance of a normal life, and they are not just a parent or just the parent of a special needs child, and they can have a life that they are able to fully participate in a lot of different activities. So Sadell Lellar Chase, I want to ask you, what's it like for you? Because you mentioned that a lot of your students at the at Tiger Sherman's, I call it the karate school. I know it's not a karate school, but a lot of your kids that you teach are autistic. What's that like?
It's challenging, very challenging. The different age groups that I teach from age 2.5 all the way up to adults, but the large chunk of my classes are 2.5 to 3, 3 to 5, and 5 to 7. And honestly, I am one of 2 instructors that teach that entire age group because it can be a difficult age group to deal with just because of their age alone. And in my opinion, it's a lot easier to instruct, especially with something that they don't get reinforcement with every single day. Like school, they go to school every day. They get, social interaction reinforcement every single day, whether it's at school or at home. Those are things that are so, but coming to kickboxing, it's twice a week. With the little ones, it's once a week. So even though they might get it that day, sometimes you have to hit the reset button every single week because it's not something being reinforced every time. And I think it's a lot easier to do that type of instruction with older children because they've had more time with the diagnosis. They've had more, supports and things in life by the time they get to, 10, 11, 12 years old. At 2, 3, 4, and 5, they're just getting diagnosed, if they're diagnosed yet at all. So that in and of itself, having a class of, let's say, 16 5-year-olds, and out of the 16, 7 or 8 of them fall on the spectrum somewhere. So you have to kind of have the personality, have the demeanor to be able to direct the entire class and not, exclude anybody, to include everybody, and also to recognize the limitations of each and every child in the class. So out of that 16, 8 of them, I can say, okay, do this, this, and this. Fine, they'll go. Out of the remaining 8, 2 of them may only be able to do half of it. 2 of them may have selective mutism. Another 2 may not be able to have eye contact. So recognizing all of that and leading an entire class for an hour is, like I said, it can be challenging. And which is why I think not a lot of us are, chomping at the bit to do it. Honestly, that's my favorite age group to work with. I love the challenge. I absolutely love it. And it kind of gives a sense of accomplishment when you see them overcome those difficulties. Like, I'll use one little boy, for example. Every kid, we give them nicknames based on their personality, what they like, what we see in class. His nickname was Tornado. When he first came in, this young man would not sit still, was literally all over the place. Now, within the past, I would say he's been there for maybe 6-7 months. Just in that short period of time, I've seen such a tremendous change in him that it's just like, I feel like he's my kid. Like I'm a proud mama. But seeing those things and seeing them overcome those things, it is actually very rewarding, especially knowing where they start and knowing where they end up. And a lot of the parents that I work with, they recognize their child isn't like the other kids in class, like whether or not they already have the diagnosis. So just having that conversation with them, like, okay, these kids are doing this. Your child is doing just fine. Like, we know where they started. We know where they're at. Naturally, they're not going to progress at the same level at the same time as the other kids, but they are progressing. So just give them that encouragement that, don't give up. They're doing just fine. Like, my expectations are different for the kids, in the class. I mean, ultimately, yes, they all learn the same thing. They just learn it at a different pace. And just recognize that as you're teaching the class is challenging.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you've ever experienced having a child who was not diagnosed and you suspected that there might be something going on and suggested to a parent that they have the child tested.
Yes. That's happened several times. And it's not something that, I would have them in class maybe 1 or 2 times, like, oh, they're on the spectrum. A lot of the kids that are like that, I've had them in my classes since they were 2.5, 3 years old. And now they're, 5 and 6. And, I'm still seeing the same kinds of things. So it's like, okay. And I would ask, have you had them tested? Are they diagnosed with anything? Is there anything that I need to know? And if they don't have a diagnosis, again, by that point, they more likely than not recognize, there's something not quite right, because they see the rest of the kids in class, and let's say they're the same belt rank as the rest of the kids, but they're just not getting it. So they recognize there's something there. So having that conversation with them is more often than not, it's not difficult.
Yeah.
So just lightly suggesting, like, okay, they've been doing this for a couple of years now. They are progressing, just not at the same rate as the other kids. It may be, in their best interest to have them tested. If they're diagnosed, great. If they're not, great. Then at that point, I kind of know where to go from there.
Right. Okay. So I'm wondering, Dr. Danita, Carmelita, what advice / encouragement would you give to someone, a parent, who either suspects that their child may be on the spectrum or their child has just been diagnosed as being on the spectrum? How would you speak to them? Dr. Nita, I'll start with you.
Well, I would suggest that the parent join a support network. Besides, getting the taking them and making sure they're in counseling and all of the different, I know Carmelita knows all of the different services that available for children. I also am very big on how much nutrition impacts children, just people in general. And so doing that research in the types of foods that would, lower inflammation, making sure that, their gut gets clean, and, limiting carbs and a lot of sugar. All of those have very positive effects on many emotional, mental health, physical health, that, it's really across the board, that lowering inflammation, lowering your carb and sugar intake has tremendous, positive impact on your physical body, your emotional health. So I would definitely, red dyes, all of that, would suggest that the parent look into changing the diet, in addition to those services that Carmelita will, probably be able to share more about.
Okay, thank you. Carmelita?
Excuse me, I 100% agree with what Dr. Danita said, and I did that as well. So that is a point. Like diet, I mean, nobody ate cleaner than Anaya in her infant, toddler, early, as she stated. I mean, she had the healthiest diet. I nursed her for 13 months, but she had that. Sleeping, everything, it helps. I'm not going to go into all the services, because I feel like if you get connected with the service providers in your area, if your child is young, early intervention, if your child is school age with the school, you will, get to know what all those services are. I think the most important thing I would share with parents, as someone who has, a gifted child, in my other child, and then Anaya, who is on the spectrum and also diagnosed with cerebral palsy. So she also, has, another diagnosis. I would say, don't see the diagnosis as a death sentence or a horrible thing. It's about your outlook. There are individuals out here on the spectrum doing amazing things. I want to just go back to Sadell a little bit, just to say I applaud you for having that sort of attitude and disposition of inclusion. As a parent, that just makes my heart happy, because the thing I really hate the most is when my child is excluded in a circumstance or situation. And I've encountered that more times than I would like to. And when I think about you with kickboxing, I think about her with gymnastics, having that was a fight, or, just constantly participating in school activities. But I would say, don't see it as a terrible thing. Just sort of like embrace that uniqueness. Like Anaya's a gift, a blessing. family, siblings, to the people she meets in the community. Like Sadell said, sometimes you see a child like that. I took her during COVID when we were on lockdown. I took the kids to swim lessons just to get them out the house. One-on-one swim was like just for something to do. At that time, she didn't swim. I tried everything to get her to swim. She never learned, and she wouldn't even put her head underwater. So I said to the instructor, like, Sadell, I didn't tell her up front that she was on the spectrum. When I got there, I said, she's on the spectrum. I'm here to support in any way. If I need to get in the water with you or whatever, I can do that. She's not afraid to get in the water, but she doesn't want to put her head under, and she can't swim. And she said, what would you like to happen? I said, for me, if she would just get comfortable with putting her head under the water, progress. She learned how to swim. That instructor cried. Like, she brought her mom out. She was like, Mom, you're not going to believe this. Like, and I mean, in just 3 weeks or something, 3 weeks of sessions, now she's a swimmer. But you know what I mean? Look, if she was like, oh, I don't know, I'm not comfortable with that. Yes, you want to be safe. Yes, you want to make sure she can save her. A life jacket is on if needed. As I stated, I'm willing to get in the pool, but don't limit your child. Don't feel like it's a death sentence or that they can't flourish. They can, and they need you to show up 100% for them and advocate. So as Dr. Danita said, get you a support group, get you some mom friends like me, find other ones out there that I will come to a meeting, I will give you the information, I will sit on the phone, whatever I can do to support somebody that needs that support. And I'm not going to be long-winded, but I want to bring it back around to the therapeutic environment. When you have not had your child diagnosed because you were in denial or just unaware, whatever the case may be, that shows up later as problematic behavior to other people. And so I provide school-based mental health therapy in middle and high school. And I see these undiagnosed teenagers who are struggling with sensory motor issues, right? That nobody else sees. Of course, I have a child on the like that. I can tell. A kid that maybe is acting out in class because they have a difficult time during transition times, like going from one class to the next class, all the noise in the hallway, or at the beginning of the class, they have trouble focusing because there's so much chatter and talking, and it takes them longer to sort of process all that information, get refocused so that they can focus on the lesson. So they might be failing because of that. And I've been able to, educate parents and educators and, get them a noise canceling headphones, simple things, a fidget in the classroom that's not disruptive, and holding their hand and helps them process. But these things show up later, and then they don't have the support that they need in the classroom, in the academic environment, or to make friends because they are acting out for other reasons. And when that support is in place, even I, as a therapist, sometimes I'm in there, arguing with the teachers and, counselors and what have you, because they don't have a diagnosis. They're like, they're not on the spectrum. They don't have a diagnosis. And I'm like, well, is it possible that was something that was missed? And I have seen many times where they've went back, done the assessments, done the evaluations, realized there was a ball dropped. I had one kid who during COVID, I think she was in 5th grade, she got on the radar to get assessed. People saw an issue. Then school went virtual. The ball dropped. 6th grade came. Ball dropped. I met her in 7th for therapy. I saw an issue. The mom, who also was dealing with a severe, medical issue, very serious, life-threatening medical issue. So it wasn't, on her game, understandably so. She said, I think she was, tested or assessed or something like that. But the school saying no. I made such a big deal that when they went back to looking at records, they're like, you know what? We see where a meeting was scheduled at the end of the year, and then COVID happened, the school shut down. Then she moved up to middle school and the ball dropped. So, I say that to say, those kids need those services in place early on, or that IEP in place to support them so that they can thrive in their academic environment and not be labeled as the problem child, the bad child, kicked out, sent to alternative school, or left out of school trips and activities and all these different types of things.
Yeah. Wow. Listen, I want to thank you all so much. This has been fantastic. It's been educational. It's been enlightening. And my prayer is that it will make a difference, even if it makes a difference in the life of one child, one parent, one grandparent, one auntie, one uncle. It will have done its job. And I want to thank you all so much for sharing all this information, and Carmelita sharing so much of yourself and your story with your daughter. It has really been amazing. I appreciate all of you so much. And those of you who are watching, next week we're going to be back with another episode, and we're going to talk about the subject is, what is love? You think you know what love is? Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But we're going to find out next Sunday.
I just want to add one thing.
Sure, baby.
If you happen to be the support person for, a parent of a child that is autistic or on the spectrum, like you guys were saying, inclusion, all of that, celebrate the small victories. I have one girl, she's 17, almost 18 years old. She is autistic. I on my one day off, I have personal training with her at another location just because it's just too overwhelming for her to go where I work. The other day was not good, but and Dad was a little embarrassed, but it's like, listen, she took her shoes off, she got in the room, we threw some punches, she did a fantastic job, for them and for the child. Like, celebrate the small things. They may be like, oh, it 45 minutes, the whole 45 minutes wasn't good. If 5 minutes of those 45 minutes were better than last week, celebrate it. It's a big deal. Let them know that they are making progress. It may not be as fast as they want it, but progress is progress. And little things, if you can get them to sit still for 5 minutes, that is a win in my book. So little things, just celebrate that and give them that encouragement, to keep going.
Yes,
that's right. That's my daughter, y'all. Yes. But again, thank you all so much. I love you guys. I love you, and I appreciate you taking the time out to be here with us this evening. And for those who are watching, I'll see you all next week. God bless you. Have a great week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.